I don't mind the same guy. This guy was
About
good.
how, despite how nice things may look in certain rings, the truth is that every ring of hell is pretty much its own prison designed to inflict suffering on its people. If you want more Helliverse content, check out our second channel, Random Universe. I put a video up ranking the 7 deadly sins the other day. Link in the
He,
pinned comment down
I don't
below,
want to
up
see
here in
that.
the corner, and at the end of the video in a form of a little pop-up. Before Has-Been Hotel, there was Zoophobia, a webcomic by VivziePop that would have featured the Has-Been Hotel cast as side characters in a dedicated arc somewhere down the line. In this comic, Hell
Definitely
is presented
interesting.
as a lot more simple compared to the one we know from Hell of a Boss, or even the smaller, simpler version of Hell that was presented to us in the
And the
Has-Been
pilot.
Hotel pilot. In Zoophobia, Hell is presented more so like we imagine in real life, a place of fire and rocks where people are chained up and tortured for their crimes. Those who escape are hunted down by an angel named Adina and her demon hunters, who just end up inflicting magical pain on characters like Angel, who then manifest visions of their sins while in extreme agony. Has-Been Hotel and later Hell of a Boss would take a very different approach to Hell, of course, with the Helliverse presenting itself less like an outright torture dungeon, and more so like a prison farm of sorts for its people. Part 1, Pride. Has-Been Hotel seems to have been designed to explore the Pride Ring entirely, which I believe at the time of Has-Been Hotel's development was the entirety of Hell that VivziePop had developed. When she decided to make a spin-off series, however, I think she would decide to build onto Hell by adding the other 6 rings, and renaming the now just small part of Hell that we saw in the Has-Been Hotel pilot the Pride Ring. As such, before Hell of a Boss could develop its own structure, Has-Been Hotel had to develop its own first, which was based a lot less on the real-life demonic lore Hell of a Boss uses to fill out its cast and native species, and a lot more on the internal lore of the sinners versus the angels. The Pride Ring is the home primarily to the Earthborn sinners, demons that were once human but who died and went to Hell because of their actions on Earth. While native species did seem to exist in Hell at the time of Has-Been Hotel's pilot, the primary focus was on the sinners, like I said, who, unlike the native species, were immortal. Instead of making Hell a place of purely physical torture as punishment, such as in Zoophobia, VivziePop leaned into the ideas that Hell, as presented in many mythic texts, is often just a metaphor for the Earth, which itself is an underworld compared to the
Well,
higher, more heavenly dimensions.
I believe that hell is just Earth, and we're sent here to grow as people and become good people, and you're forced to try again and again until you can make it into heaven, being our punishment. As Jesus went down to hell and brought everyone up, I think only the truly evil beings from heaven get sent to hell instead.
The Earth is presented in these philosophies as a place where higher divine beings fall due to their crimes in a more heavenly place, wherein they would succumb to their natural vices and sink further into a state of degeneration within the Earth. Society as a whole, particularly a capitalistic society, becomes a place where humans exist in order to be milked for profit. And when you understand humans, the most easy way to do this is with addictions. Now, we think of addiction mostly through the lens of drugs, but even outside of that, addiction is something that runs rampant in capitalism as a whole, or especially in consumerism. The ideas here are best presented through Angel Dust and his relationship to Valentino, which helps to paint the relationship between the sinners as a whole and the overlords. Angel was sent to Hell for a variety of reasons, but chief among those is his addiction to his PCP, though he was also part of a crime family. If he was more like his father, however, who was focused on those crimes, Angel would have a higher standing in Hell overall, being someone who deals out vices for profit like his father in the drug game, instead of someone whose vices is milked for profit by another overlord. Angel is supposed to be the most famous adult film star in Hell, which in Hell is supposed to make him more well known than the average celebrity. Angel is ultimately just a symbol for the addiction of the many people who watch his videos and the other works of Valentino, the overlord of adult films. Because of his addiction, Angel is essentially trapped in his dynamic with Valentino, where he is supposed to make Valentino as much money as possible, being one of the most famous people in Hell, while still coming back to a very tiny apartment in the prequel comics, where we can see where Angel lived before moving into the hotel. The goal of Angel at the
I didn't
hotel
know
is
that.
not to actually end his addiction, but to save enough money on rent living there that he can save up to get his own place and leave Valentino and his industry for good. Perhaps doing similar work, but having a secure place and fun for himself to do so without Valentino. However, the problem Angel has is that he is immortal. He can't die. He can overdose, but it won't kill him or end his existence. And it will just make his tolerance higher and higher, meaning his habit only becomes more expensive with no real way out of the addiction without someone to help him and hold him down so he stops. And this is what every sinner in hell is experiencing. Some prefer alcohol, some prefer strippers, some are just addicted to TV, but all of them are slaves to their vices. We've already seen how Mammon has mass-marketed Fizzaroli for as much money as possible, with some of the interesting addictions of the people being explored in the way they obsess over his merch. It's not hard to see in this fandom even how some people have a very strange relationship with media and merchandise, with people coming to really worship some of the big franchises that they adore, and creating essentially pointlessly large collections that only end up being a testament to how much of their life they are willing to spend working in order to give money to an image. No matter what your vice is as a sinner, there is no escaping a pretty hellish life in the Pride Ring, one where you ultimately create your perfect prison by using your sins and vices in your earthly life as the blueprint for your immortal existence in hell. The Pride Ring is the one ring where every single vice is being used by one overlord or another to extract more wealth out of the general population, as opposed to one sin or vice in particular being spearheaded by the ruling prince in another ring. The Pride Ring is also unique in that it is one of the few rings with a real escape from the tortures of hell. While every ring has to have some higher class parts of its communities, Pride offers you the chance to escape the general suffering that the other sinners go through if you are just a different kind of sinful, as this is the ring where you are most likely to rise to power with enough time, as long as your sinful nature is that of exploiting others, like Valentino, instead of abusing yourself, like Angel. Part 2, Wrath. The sinners are unique with their immortal lives and having an earthly life before being judged to live in hell, but the native species that mostly come from the other rings of hell are not so lucky. They are born into hell and only for a short time compared to the immortal sinners, particularly the imps who have a lifespan closer to, but longer than, earthly humans. The natives are born into hell for a short time, with immortals as a whole having made them
They never described where they go, did they? They never said, oh yeah, they went somewhere after they died. Like, if their lives are closer to humans, but it's not true because he said even Blitz has been around forever.
Slave class in some cases, with no better example than the imps. The imps and hellhounds are both called the lowest of the low in hell, and while hellhounds seem to be adopted as servants into some of the more well-to-do families, the imps as a whole are a class that only exists to serve the machinery of hell, if you will. The Wrath Ring is displayed as the poorest of the rings, being a desert wasteland with lava and fire tornadoes that has no real benefit other than that it can grow large amounts of food. The imps are meant to parallel the ignorant or unintelligent class that develops in most any community or culture. They represent those who were naturally in a geographical location to perform this sort of labor, and those who are intelligent enough and who desire to escape this life are able to do so, leaving behind only the people who are not intelligent for the most part to reproduce and eventually become the entire population of this area. Those like Millie who have skill and intelligence can go elsewhere and make a decent living and a better life for themselves overall, but those who can't stay and have to use their more physical attributes to maintain Hell's system of farming and military with little benefit for themselves. You exist in Wrath to either die in a war or to farm so that other people can eat, including immortal sinners. And despite them being in charge of the farming, I imagine the Wrath Ring to be the first to starve when there are food shortages, with even more immortal sinners seeming to have more financial opportunities to buy the food, and the imps themselves not really owning the food.
Yeah, but if they're immortal, why do they need to eat at all?
Seems fun when watching the episode Harvest Moon Festival, but only because it's people who are too ignorant to realize that they are worked to the bone and then killed off so that everybody else can enjoy the benefits of their labor, and ultimately do the less demanding work within that system. Part 3, Gluttony. One ring down from Wrath is the Gluttony Ring, whose system seems largely dependent not on creating a profit for anyone, but on preventing their ruler from absolutely destroying the local population. Beelzebub is a nice and personable demon on the surface, one who can even feel other people's moods and react to them.
Right.
She likes a good mood overall, and as such, her part of the Gluttony Ring is designed with beautiful architecture and constant party atmosphere. The Hellhounds are allowed at these parties, some from high class, but some from low class stations as well, and all that really matters is that the mood is good. This seems to control the effect of the Beelzejuice being made, which Beelzebub doesn't just love, but seems to need in order to keep herself calm. She's the royal we've seen go from her small form to her beast form in the fastest time, absolutely snapping when she finally has had enough of Luna's attitude. Beelzebub's system isn't in place like in the Wrath Ring to enslave the population for the hardest of work,
What's it
or
for?
like the Pride Ring to create a sort of prison farm to extract wealth. Beelzebub's ring is instead the most tragic because the suffering is done here in order to just keep her calm. We don't know the origins of Beelzebub in the show, with only Lucifer being confirmed to be a fallen angel, and the rest being up for debate until they need to make a decision in the show for one reason or another. But the way the system works now, Beelzebub, without her Beelzejuice, seems like she would just be an unhinged giant monster, not ruling over her ring, but terrorizing it. The many Hellhounds probably wouldn't stand a chance against her, and in the end, it seems their entire existence is just about maintaining her mood. These Hellhound parties seem to be part of the culture that leads to the Hellhound Pounds, with Hellhounds likely giving birth to an entire litter in a relatively short time of pregnancy compared to humans and likely other demons, with real-life dogs taking just about 2 months to the human 9 months. With Hellhounds already being a low part of society, they wouldn't have a lot of options for taking care of their many children, and the Hellhound Pounds would become how young pups are taken care of, by being kept in cages for most of their childhood, with just a few adult workers there to check in on them and make sure they are fed. These adoptions, as per Luna's contract, are signed off by Beelzebub, with the signature here confirmed by the writers to be B-E-E for Beelzebub, with the second E accidentally looking more like an L, leading some to speculate that it was Belphegor by accident. Beelzebub has created a system where she throws money into what surrounds her, but gives the absolute bare minimum to the consequences of her actions, creating a cycle of abuse with those Hellhounds, not knowing any better than to go to the parties and make the same mistakes as their parents. The Hellhounds spend their entire childhood suffering then, and are given access to places where they can get wild and abuse substances to cope with that trauma, and ultimately create a new generation to suffer again.
I never
Also, that their
thought
demonic
about it
queen
that way.
doesn't become
Like,
a monster that could
to be
destroy
honest, not once came to that conclusion.
them all. While many of the princes seem like they were sent to their ring to be its leaders, some rings seem like cages more so for the deadly sins than for their natives, and gluttony may have just been a wild part of hell that Beelzebub was dropped in to contain her until she found the Beelzejuice and ways to start controlling herself. On that note, part 4 is Mammon, who I very much believe to have been sent to the Greed Ring in order for it to contain him and stop him from doing too much damage to the rest of hell. As we've explored hell in the different rings, we've started to see less of its slums and more places where hell actually looks kind of like a cool place to live, even if there's something dark going on behind the Candyland exterior, like in the Gluttony Ring. The Greed Ring, however, seems to be the slum of the 7 rings as a whole, a place that is not naturally poor the way the Wrath Ring is, but a place that actually has plenty of economic viability that is being exploited to such an extreme it is practically self-sabotage. What makes the Greed Ring interesting is that in other rings, indulging in the sin is what makes you a victim, but here, people are the victim of the sin. Gluttony is about making you overindulge to keep its system going. Wrath is about getting angry to fight in Hell's wars. The Sloth Ring encourages sloth through its prescription drugs, but the Greed Ring is a place where the majority of people are not indulging
Forced to
in the
work,
sin,
right?
or being forced to indulge in the sin as people in the Lust Ring might be, but instead are just the innocent bystanders being exploited by greed. In the Greed Ring, the loan sharks do seem to embody their sin and use that to help milk the ring and its other inhabitants for as much money as possible, who can be greedy themselves but are mostly just the victims of Mammon's greed at the end of the day. This is a place where even if you have good intentions and are well off, everyone around you is trying to find a way to milk you until you have nothing left. In the Greed Ring, it is not enough for capitalism or consumerism to work. Those tools only get marketed towards foreigners visiting the places such as Lululand. Within the Ring of Greed, they wouldn't want the local population being wealthy enough to enjoy consumerism. Instead, it's about forcing out any possible competition so that there is only 2 sides, the side that makes money and the side that works to make money and only lives to work. Now, Lust is a ring I don't want to say too much on for a few reasons. Lust in particular is depicted as a nice place to live compared to the other rings because it is heavily tied to Asmodeus, with him hardly even being sinful because at the end of the day, he is one of the more important characters and we are meant to like him. The people of the Lust Ring are people who move there because they are
Eh.
lustful themselves, or the succubus, who are generally going to be seductive as well, but there is definitely a dark element to exploiting an entire class of demon to sex work, taking what is natural and fun for them and turning it into a way that supports their system. We've seen through Fizzaroli and Angel Dust that these workers don't have much of a choice in what they do or who they see, and I don't imagine it is any different for people in the Lust Ring. That being said, Lust is mostly presented as one of the best places to live despite this, one where Asmodeus, at the very least, uses this not-perfect system to make sure that his people live an otherwise comfortable life, which at the end of the day, they might be really grateful for, at least when comparing their existence to the rest of Hell. Next,
Why wouldn't
is
everyone
Envy.
move
Little
there
is
then?
known about the Envy Ring, but it's believed to be home to the deep sea demons that we've seen here and there in the show. It is believed that they are more isolated because they might live in an ocean where other demons simply can't exist without drowning, making it for a nicer place overall that only they have access to. However, while they are the envy of other rings, I imagine they may also be rather envious of other rings for reasons we might not know. With so little known, this is
Probably
one ring
'cause
where
it's
I
the
can't
whole
say for certain
ocean.
exactly how they are suffering, with even Lust still having darker implications just because of the nature of its industry. But I will definitely be talking about this more once we meet its prince or visit its ring ourselves in the show. The same cannot be said for the seventh and final ring, however, Sloth, which I believe to be the darkest ring of them all, despite its bright pink cotton candy skies. This ring circles back to the Pride Ring in its key addiction, which is once again drugs, but this time under the guise of medically necessary pharmaceuticals. There's a lot of debate in real life about which drugs are allowed as prescription medicine of sorts, as many of them seem to be more dangerous than other illegal substances. I'm not here to debate what is good or what is bad in particular, but to talk about the very scary way this is portrayed in the Pride Ring. The first thing we see of the Sloth Ring is the Sleepy Pills app on Blitz's phone, alongside the other apps clearly themed after different princes, leaving the Sleepy Pills app for Sloth.
Oh, that makes
Following
sense.
that, we saw the prescription Happy Pills that Stolas has, with him going from just one pill to an entire handful over the course of the last year in the show. These two combined paint a picture of Belphegor as someone who, as the embodiment of sloth, surrendered entirely to a lazy lifestyle and let it destroy them. Now, it's well understood that without enough stimulation,
Probably the
activity in
worst
your
one
day,
for
you
sure.
will inevitably grow restless and struggle to actually sleep at night, despite the extra rest in the day making you feel tired and burnt out. This leads to wanting sleeping pills to maintain a more typical sleep cycle, and over time, happy pills to maintain your mood with stimulation during the day. This is a horrifying lifestyle to inflict on oneself, but even more horrifying is that Belphegor has used this same formula to enslave her population, keep them docile, and continue to milk the rest of Hell for its money. While Sloth seems to provide some real health care, its extravagance I imagine to be a combination of the ridiculous prices they can charge for their prescription drugs.
It's supposed to be an IRL, like how the medical industry in the United States is complete garbage. It's garbage. And I'm pretty sure that's what they're making a reference to here.
And the large gaps they put between their patients' meetings, allowing for them to not have nearly as many facilities as they actually could for the benefit of their population. The primary focus of all these meetings just seems to be to get people hooked on more pills, with you even being able to order them through your phone. Sloth is the best ring that showcases how, even with extravagance, it's still just extravagant slavery and exploitation, giving you convenience and ease and whatever pills or food or drink you need on tap, as long as you spend as much of your waking day as possible extracting wealth from the system to funnel back towards this vice. But what do you guys think? What are the craziest ways?
Okay, interesting. Not particularly my favorite, but I guess like the explanations were more or less accurate. I think they're pretty good.